Okay, hi everyone. Today, going through a bit of a structuring video, and we're going to look at a fairly common structure or setup that a lot of business owners will use. Working through, when it's beneficial, when it's not beneficial, where your income needs to be to make it worthwhile, and then a bit of a conversation around bucket companies, what they are, how they're used, and again, when they're worthwhile and when they're not. So we're going to probably be talking about a few more advanced things today. So if you're still sort of getting the hang of a few of these things, check out some of the other videos. We'll try to make it as common sense as we possibly can. But if something's not making sense, get in touch or check out our other videos. And to start this off, we've got a bit of work to sort of move through here. But to start this off, we're just going to look at what is a fairly common structure for a lot of business owners. And that would be, we've got a trading company and we're using a discretionary trust or a family trust to hold the shares, to be the shareholder in that company. And so let's just look through this model here. We've got John and Jane. That's our two taxpayers, and they might have a few kids. They're running a business through a company, so a trading company. It's a private company there. So this entity here runs the business and it pays a 25% tax rate. Now here we're assuming this is sort of a genuine business. They've got staff, they've got structure, and we're not falling into that whole personal services income area that I will discuss in another video. But here we've got a genuine business structure and we've got a family trust as well that is the shareholder of this company. And so instead of John and Jane owning the shares directly, we've got this trust in here. And as you may know, a trust is a flow-through entity. So often it will receive funds, often via a dividend from the operating company, and then it will pass those on to our beneficiaries in a flexible manner. So this can change year on year, and that's the benefit of a discretionary trust. But looking at this here, let's just say the company makes a profit, it pays a dividend up to the trust, and then we can give some to Jane, flexible every year, we can give some to John, and then the other piece we're going to talk about is when we have those excess profits or those super profits, we can pay those through to a bucket company and use that as our investment vehicle to sort of build wealth over the long term. And just note the difference in tax rates here. This trading company has a tax rate of 25%. A bucket company like this will typically have a 30% tax rate. There are ways to get a bucket company down to the 25%. We're not going to go into that right now. We're just going to assume that it is 30%. And you can see this dotted line here as well. We're saying on this side of the dotted line, we're in the company tax rate environment. As we pass over the line to John and Jane's territory, we're in personal tax rate territory. And so just a refresher for everyone, in the 25-26 income year, these are our marginal tax rates. So, the first $18,000 we earn, tax-free. Up to $45,000, we then pay 16%. From 45 to 130, it goes up to 30%. Above 135 to 190, we're paying 37%, and then the big top rate is if you're earning over 190, we're paying 45% tax. And note as well, you've got to add 2% Medicare levy to all these rates as well, so that it's really 32%, and it's really 47% tax. Very, very high tax rates compared to our business tax rate or our base rate entity, so that's our trading company, and then our bucket company tax rate of 30%. So you can see here, if you're earning $200,000, the difference between the bucket company rate, 30%, and your personal rate, it's going to be about 17% tax difference. And let's just work through when we would do this and what the benefit would be. And to do that, we're going to compare two examples we're going to compare a situation where we don't use the trust, we don't use the bucket company. We've just got a very simple structure where we're trading out of a company and John and Jane are 50% shareholders each. And we're going to compare that to the use of the bucket company. So if we just focus on this section right here, let's just say example 1, our company has a profit of $400,000. And that's our operating profit before we've paid out any wages or anything like that. Now, obviously, when you're starting out, your profit's not going to be that high, but we're assuming here we've really got a established business and that the owners have spent many years building this up, and now they're enjoying those good profits. If they want to get them out of the company, they want to get them over the line, they've got to get them out somehow, and they might pay them out as a wage or a dividend. I do have another video on getting money out of the company, and you get into this whole conversation around Division 7A, which is something that us accountants love banging on about. But check out the other video that goes through that. We won't get into it here because it'll be a very long video. But let's just say we've got an operating profit in the company of $400,000, and we decide to pay that out just via wages to John and to Jane. And they don't mind paying a bit of super as well, because they're going to be approaching retirement in the years ahead, and they're keen to drop in some cash into their super. So we're going to give John a salary of just under 180. He has to pay super on that at 12%, so that goes into the fund. Same with Jane, she's getting the same salary and same amount of super. So as you can see, of the $400,000 profit, we've paid almost all of it out, and there's just a little bit left in the company, but we won't worry about that. John and Jane then pay about $50,000 worth of tax on their personal wages, and then they're left with $127,000 each, or about $250,000 combined. We won't talk about superannuation and the tax on that in the fund, probably a different conversation, but let's just focus on John and Jane here. And so as you can see there, if your profit was $200,000 or even $300,000, if there's 2 people active in the business, that might be okay. You might not need to worry about doing anything else. You might be happy just paying that tax and keeping it simple and keeping the costs low, and just going on with business as usual. But you might be looking at this and saying, all right, we've paid our tax and then we've got 250 grand left over. Another situation where you would probably do this is if you are spending all of your money every year, you're like upgrading the cars or going on holidays or expensive costs. If you're going to spend it all, just do this, because this whole strategy is not going to help you. It really only helps when we've got 250 grand cash, but we only need to spend 150 to feed the family and do everything we want to do, and we've got some leftover cash that we want to invest and build wealth. That is very, very critical, okay? There's no point doing any of this if we're just going to spend the money, because again, we get trapped in this Division 7A problems, and you're just going to wind up paying a lot of accounting fees for not much value. So just bear that in mind. We're thinking about a situation where we don't have to spend all the cash. We've got excess profits that we want to invest, and that might be in property or in shares. Some people like private credit, or any number of other investments. And so that's our base case here, where we've just got a simple setup. Now, let's think about our structure, and that is the second part of this example here, right here. So, we've got the same amount of profit, but we've decided we don't need quite as much to live off, so we're going to drop John and Jane's wage down from 178 down to 135 each. Now that's a good place to be, because at 135 grand, you've just reached the top of your 30% tax bracket, And if we go over that amount, then we're paying that extra 7%. So if we're happy and we can live off of this amount of money, that's what we're doing. Which means we have a profit of 400. We've paid out 300 in wages and super to John and Jane. And that leaves about $100,000 of retained earnings in the company. Now, if we think about the tax, what happens here? John and Jane pay their personal tax, and they are left with $100,000 each, or $200,000 combined. The company is going to pay tax at 25%, and it's going to be left with about $70,000 worth of cash. Okay. What's it going to do with that cash? We're gonna pay that out as a dividend. Okay. So we're going to pay a franked dividend through to the trust. And now John and Jane don't need any more cash. They want to invest it and they want to grow it. So they're going to pay that surplus profits over to the bucket company. And it does have a 30% tax rate in this example. So what that means is we're going to pay a fully franked dividend through the trust to the bucket company. The bucket company does have to pay a little bit of top-up tax, the extra 5%, because this was 25%, this is 30%. So we're just paying a little bit of top-up tax here, about $5,000, and that leaves us with $68,000 worth of cash, net of tax, in the bucket company that we can use. So what would people do with that? Commercial property is a great example. If you wanted to buy a commercial property, you might want to do it in a bucket company, for example. They're often a bit higher yielding, and so you could borrow some money within the company. You could buy some real estate in here. Residential property, shares, you could buy shares using the trust and the company, and again the surplus profits are going to get dumped here. Private credit is another one. You might be able to get 12% doing a private credit transaction through that bucket company. All right. So what have we achieved here? What's the tax savings in year one? If we think about this tax savings in year one, we're looking at about $4,000 or $5,000, and that is not a whole lot. And you might say, that's not really worth the effort, the extra accounting fees, the headache of doing all this. Let's not worry. But that's not really the true benefit of the bucket company. I think to explain that, you really need to look at a longer time horizon, and you've got to think, all right, 5, 10, 15 years, is this thing working for us or not? And so if we just looked at the pure tax savings from the distribution on over a 10-year time horizon, looking at 45, 50 grand, decent, but again, you might say, oh, it's still not massive. But the thing you got to keep in mind is the investments and the activities that bucket company is going to be undertaking. So, and when I say that, we mean the earnings on our investment and the tax on that. So if we just went with option one, super simple structure, and we're still investing some of that money in our personal names, and maybe we've got properties in our personal names, or maybe we've got shares and we're earning dividends. If we're up at this point here, after a few dividends and a bit of interest over the years, we're probably going to be in this top bracket. And so that means that if we earn 10 grand worth of dividends, we're paying 47% tax on those dividends. If instead the cash was invested in this environment here, and we are receiving dividends, and we receive $10,000 worth of dividends, we're only paying tax at 30% on all those investment earnings year after year after year, instead of the 47%. And so, as an example here, on 10 grand worth of interest or dividends or rent, the tax difference is $1,700, 17%. Now you can see that really starts to compound year after year, and especially if you're generating, this much profit, you should be probably, allocating a decent amount of that to investment. So that's a massive compounding factor right there. And the real kicker with these as well is also when you start thinking about retirement planning and, how you're going to get the money out of those bucket companies. And it also comes into, you should also be thinking about your franking credits here as well. And so we've got an example here. What about retirement? Let's just say John and Jane, they've built this business up, they're 50 and they want to retire at 60. So they work away at this for 10 years. And every year they put their excess profits into the bucket company. And again, they're always paying that company tax every year. It's lower than their personal tax, so they're saving a bit, but they're still paying that tax. If you're familiar with how franking credits work, you will know that company tax is not lost forever. Individual tax we pay, John and Jane pay it, it's gone forever. Once you pay it, you never get it back. Company tax, there's always an opportunity to get it back via a franking credit. And so if you've invested in shares on the stock exchange, let's say you own shares in Commonwealth Bank, you'll know you get your dividend and you get your franking credits as well. And that is basically the tax that the company has paid gets passed on to you as a shareholder, and you can use that to offset your tax. And the whole point of that is that to avoid double taxation. So if you didn't have a franking credit, the company would pay tax when it earned the money, and then you would pay tax on the same earnings when you receive the dividend. So what that means is over the years, this bucket company is paying tax. We can still get it back as a franking credit. And so pretty common, if we work hard, we've been putting money into our super fund, and John and Jane now retire, and they're drawing on their super fund. So they're getting a tax-free pension from their super fund, but they've also built up this big amount of wealth in the bucket company. And let's just say they've got, over the years, they've built up $1 million there. They're now retired. Their income has dropped right down. Instead of being up in these high tax brackets now, they're now down in these two, low tax brackets because their pension from their super fund is tax-free, which means that we have a bunch of low bracket here that we can use up. And so we want to get that money out of the company and enjoy our retirement. What we're going to do is we're going to pay John and Jane a $40,000 frank dividend each, over the next 10 years. And the real kicker with these bucket companies is that if we do that, we've already paid the tax, we're getting the franking credits back, and so they're going to come back in as a refund. They're going to cover the tax on the dividend, and they're going to come back, the excess will come back as a refund. And so this figure I've highlighted here, we're saying over 10 years, that is an extra $164,000 worth of franked dividend, franking credits, or actually the refund component. So that's extra cash in our pocket that we would not get otherwise. And we're only getting it because we paid the company tax all these years, and now we're getting some of it back as a franking credit. You cannot do that just under the simple structure. And so these bucket companies are awesome if you are committed to building long-term wealth, compounding it, and then looking to the future and saying, all right, I'm going to wind back work at some point. Maybe you're retirement age, maybe you're not. Maybe you've done well and you can finish up beforehand. And we're going to pull those retained profits out while taking advantage of our lower tax brackets. And that way, we're basically getting back some of the tax that we paid over all those years. And so this is not a way to just avoid tax or dodge tax. It's nothing like that. We're saying we're paying less tax now so that we can compound our wealth over the years. And then at a later date, we're still paying a bit of tax, but we're at a lower income bracket now. So we truly are saving a lot of tax doing this. But again, it only works if you're committed to a long-term strategy. A few notes on a structure like this. There's plenty of ways to do this. This is just one structure. A few notes here might be, what are the costs and the benefits? And one of the great things about this is we don't actually need this bucket company straight away. You might just set it up with a family trust, and during the first years of the business, you might not be generating enough profit to justify this. And so we don't have to have it there, and we don't have to pay for it every year. You might only add this in at year 5 or year 10 of running your business once you've built it up to a point where you can use it. And so in those early years, we don't even need to worry about this. We just use the trust, and you're not paying your accounting fees or your ASIC fees to maintain that bucket company in the early years. So that is a great benefit. We can actually tack this on later. And then you might say, look, why not just make the bucket company the direct shareholder? Why bother with the trust and what we're doing here? 2 points there. The first is the trust is all about flexibility. As I said, again, in the early years, we can just give it to John and Jane, and we can add that on later. Now, some people will have a company interposed here, and that's more of a holding company rather than a bucket company. And there are a lot of times when I would recommend that, and it is a great strategy to put your holding company in here, and then have another family trust behind that as well. I'll do another video on holding companies, and they are great in a lot of circumstances. Again, it's more cost and more complexity, so we just have to have the profits to justify it. But this is a great sort of middle ground where we can just keep it relatively simple in the early years, and then we can add on a bucket company as our profits sort of really get up into this region here. And then planning through to retirement, there can be a massive, massive benefit of doing this. So, if we think about the benefits, we've got some tax savings year on year just due to the tax differential between your personal tax rates and the company. B, over the years, that cash is going to earn investment income, interest or dividends or rent. We are saving tax on all of those components year after year as well. And then number 3, or C, the big one is during retirement, we want to get some money out of this company here. We are getting really good franking credit refunds, and we're actually getting back some of that tax we already paid. Hope this makes sense. Feel free to get in touch to talk through this if you think this is worthwhile to you, or go and chat to your advisors. To do something like this, we really need to think about legal advice and tax advice. Again, this is only for informational purposes, so you'd really just want to talk through the details, see what applies to you, and see what we can do. So feel free to get in touch if you're interested. Thanks, guys.